Docs across the country are starting to get sick, and docs and nurses are worried about what this means for us and for our patients.
That ER doctor voicing the sentiments of physicians and nurses nationwide. We hear it all the time now, that the country faces a major shortage of medical equipment, and they're worried more will be needed as the number of coronavirus cases continues to climb. The president says the states should find a way, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah, joining us live this morning, Tony Uphoff, the president and CEO of ThomasNet.com, a leader in manufacturing and product sourcing. What this company does, it helps buyers find suppliers, puts those two things together. Good morning. So you're seeing huge demand for things like PPE, hazmat suits, industrial alcohol, disinfectants, surgical masks, and respirators. Why are we having difficulty getting these supplies?
Well, just remarkable surge in demand. And it started about 8 weeks ago. And we could see that surge initially coming out of China and Asia, but then rapidly we could see it across North America. And what you have here, unfortunately, is a bit of a perfect storm. So the World Health Organization suggests we need 89 million surgical masks a month to effectively deal with this. That would require about a 40% lift in current manufacturing supply. Bear in mind that a good 70% of the current supply that's been disrupted comes out of China and Taiwan. So you had this unbelievably challenging situation where the epicenter of where this outbreak started is the leading manufacturer, particularly of surgical masks and a lot of that personal protection equipment.
And Tony, how hard is it to make these supplies? I mean, we're seeing such an increase in demand. It's not as if they're super complicated, I would think, but they're having a really hard time.
I think on things like surgical masks and gloves, you're absolutely correct. Respirators, a bit more, complicated. Sure. Containment systems, hazmat suits, but sticking to the surgical masks and the gloves, they're not difficult, but there are a couple of things that we have to bear in mind. We have to start to divert the raw materials, the cloth materials, the rubber materials to companies, garment manufacturers that could pivot and start to produce these types of things. We also need to make sure that the regulatory agencies can loosen up and let this go. So as an example, any material that's used in a medical, environment needs OSHA and other compliance. So we need to make sure that we can speed some of that through and get those companies the raw materials they need.
The vice president said that the private sector was going to step up and come to the rescue here. Is that practical?
I can't speak to whether it's practical. I will tell you it's happening. And so you can clearly see that, manufacturers and suppliers are simply taking action right now. We can see it all across our platform. We've literally seen over 250,000 companies sourcing on the platform just this week, only in these product categories alone. So there's a tremendous amount of activity happening. You also can see that advanced manufacturing today, companies can pivot what they do in that factory pretty quickly.
Sure.
Now, this is going to take a little while, but companies can do that quickly. The other thing I would suggest here, too, is slowly but surely we're seeing China come back online as a manufacturer. And so I think there is some hope that we can get this moving. But, boy, if you look at the numbers, we've got to move quickly on this. And the private sector is going to need to move very quickly to support it.
Tony, let me ask you real quickly. Peter Navarro, who advises the president on trade policy in the White House, says that this crisis, sadly, is a vindication of the president's sort of America First policies, that if more of this stuff was made in the United States, this wouldn't be a problem. Do you agree?
We've seen reshoring happening, for the last 7 to 8 years in the United States. This will accelerate it, and I will say it will reshape global manufacturing for years to come, without question.
Okay.
All right, Tony Uphoff, thanks so much for getting up with us this morning. It's really important, and we appreciate what you're doing. Thanks.